Hello and welcome back to another episode of RE Radar. Once again, I'm your host and realtor, Nathan Mathisen. Thank you so much for joining me. And on the radar today and every day, we're all about that education component in real estate. And how I'm going to be bringing that to y'all with this episode is with my special guest, Patrick Cobb, who is the partner and managing principal at Stack, which is a company that provides real estate development solutions. So thank you so much for joining us today, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And I guess just jumping right into it, could you maybe give the audience a little bit of background on yourself and what led you to co-found Stack, and then exactly kind of what Stack does?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my background is in architecture. So originally I studied architecture way back 20 years or so ago. It was kind of the beginning of my career. It was, just interested in design and planning. And I had a lot of great experiences there and lived in, a few different places, traveled a lot, and always kind of came back to, what my interest is personally as a professional, which was to improve cities, right? To build great neighborhoods, to be part of great neighborhoods. And I think whenever I moved to Seattle, I'd lived in New York for a number of years, worked out there. And whenever I came out to Seattle initially, I really appreciated and I liked the way the city was laid out. I liked the way the neighborhoods were laid out. And so that became a real interest of mine, which was how do we do urban infill development and do it really well, do good design and improve the neighborhoods of the city as it goes through this huge transformation. As far as founding Stack, I've worked with my partners for the last, I guess, about 10 years now. We worked together at another real estate development company, working on urban infill communities, residential projects, primarily mixed use apartments. And just felt like we all worked together really well. And we wanted to continue doing that kind of development, but doing it for ourselves and actually being able to invest our own capital into projects. And that really led to the creation of Stack. What we're doing right now is we're doing our own investment. So we're looking for urban infill locations. We're looking for residential opportunities within, really good neighborhoods in and around Seattle, and focused right now on investing in small lot. So these are primarily to develop single family townhouse style projects in some of those really great neighborhoods. And so that's what we're focused on the investment side. We also provide development services. So we provide development consulting, ranging from architectural design, planning, feasibility, development management, owner representation, focused on all of those same product types. Everything from your small lot, single family, townhouse, all the way up to mixed use, multifamily projects.
Yeah, I think your company's in a very good niche of spots that's very important in Seattle in that development side, and bringing more homes to Seattle. And that's one of the big topics on this podcast that I want to touch on is with those DADUs, ADUs, the additions, and how Washington State is working on getting their code changed to kind of better allow for that. Could you kind of expand on how the current regulations might be changing in that and what the advantages that could be?
Yeah, I'd go back a little bit in time and talk a little bit about the history of Seattle and kind of how it's developed. Back in, say, pre-2018, all the neighborhoods would have been called, single family, 5,000, 7,200, 9,600. And those were generally, all kind of planned to keep existing single family homes and sort of neighborhoods intact exactly as they had been for a long time. And so every once in a while you would see a new development. Maybe it's a tear down or an improvement of an existing property, but it always with just a larger home or making the existing property better, which was good. And the city really focused on providing opportunities around urban villages, around commercial areas to have high density townhomes up to, and apartments focused around those nodes. And those nodes would typically be places where you might have mass transit, bus stops, train stops. But there's only so much land that can accommodate new development. And I think, the majority of the city is actually made up of single family zones. So the estimate is in Seattle that around 75% of all of the land mass of the city was single family zoning. And so I think that there was an opportunity there that the city was exploring on how do we improve and how do we provide, opportunities for additional density in the city as more people are moving here, or to be able to help people who are already living here have places to live, to buy. And so they kind of moved forward with accessory dwelling units and detached accessory dwelling units. That was a possibility, but there was an ownership occupancy covenant that was required on any new development. And this is still in place in most of the municipalities around Seattle, in Bellevue, Shoreline, Redmond. I think all of those still have that ownership occupancy covenant, which limits your ability to sell those homes. So going back in 2018, Seattle took away the owner occupancy covenant. And what that did is that allowed investors to be able to go in and purchase properties and then develop up to 2 accessory dwelling units. And that really unlocked the opportunity for investment. And so over the last 5 to 7 years, you've seen just the number of permits and the number of applications and new developments increasing pretty rapidly. Not everybody really knew about it or knew how to go about it, but kind of the professional investors, developers really started participating in that space. I would also add, I think it's been really good for existing homeowners who are wanting to invest and gain passive income on their property to be able to actually build, a structure in their backyard and to be able to unlock value. And
that's a great point to make, kind of right there. With it's not just these laws, potential changes aren't just for investors to come in and be able to do all this building. It also has a good amount of benefits for current homeowners to be able to create, like you were mentioning, that passive income and a number of different avenues, like the staying in place in your neighborhood, but downsizing. You stay in that same neighborhood you live in, you can get a DADU, the detached additional dwelling in the back, and you live in that same neighborhood, a much smaller home, easier to maintain. And then you could rent out your big home in the front lot, or you could sell that off, but you're staying in that neighborhood. So the benefits are for really homeowners and investors, which I think is a great point to really emphasize.
right, I agree with that. I think that there's, a huge need for, so, a house isn't a one size fits all for everybody, right? And we want to create, pathways for our kids as they grow and they get older to be able to actually stay in the neighborhoods and not to have to move to another place to be able to find a small apartment or a place where they can actually afford it. And so that one size fits all, I think that's one of the biggest benefits, I think, for ADUs and DADUs is it provides something that's still very much akin to a single family typology, but maybe it works for somebody who's getting older and they need a place to stay. They want to stay on their property, but they don't need 3,000 square feet of a home, and maybe they don't want to continue to maintain it. So it provides them kind of a pathway to stay in the neighborhood and generate some wealth as well.
And one other thing, Patrick, I want to really touch on here is kind of the new legislation that's coming up and coming through the works right now here in 2025. If you could touch on that and what that might bring for the people out there with homes.
Yeah, absolutely. So there has been a statewide mandate that's made single-family zoning illegal for most, if not all, cities, and affects cities that are over 75,000 residents more than the others. But most of the municipalities, including Shoreline, Bellevue, Kirkland, Redmond, and Seattle, are working through legislation changes to respond to that. And so what that means is there is no such thing as single family zoning in the future. And the new legislation is really structured to add density and to incentivize additional density. So you're actually able to build more the smaller the lots are. And what it allows you to do, which is different than accessory dwelling units. Accessory dwelling units, your home ownership option is condominiumization. So if you want to sell an individual home, the primary, the ADU, and the DADU, you have to condominiumize it. And that's kind of your pathway to selling it. That works fine. There's some limitations there and some hurdles in terms of getting a mortgage for it. The new code is actually allowing for the lots to be subdivided down to smaller lots. So you may be able to subdivide a lot down to 4 or 6 units, depending on your location, which is really more, and all of those all of those homes can be attached. So they can really be more of like a townhouse or a row house typology. The main message there is there's a lot more flexibility for homeowners, for investors and developers. There's a lot more flexibility with what you can do with your property. Whether you're staying in your home, it just gives you a lot more freedom to be able to unlock the value of your property. And it gives future investors, well, I also want to say it adds value to your property. So if you were to put your property on the market and an investor comes in and they know they can build 3 or 4 homes on that, it's going to add value to your property. And so it gives you just a lot more flexibility in terms of
That's a
exit
great
or
point
what you
right
want to do
there. With bringing value to these homeowners, these new laws to allow for them to have a home that maybe it's not in the best of conditions, but it's a decent lot. And so instead of now having only being able to sell it to another person who's looking to live in a single family home, an investor can come in and they'll buy up this home and then be able to add multiple units to that lot to then make their money back and be a good investment for them.
And so the timing for this is soon. So the legislation should be going into effect in all of the municipalities that are working through it right now as of the end of June. I think that's the state mandate.
So it's coming on soon, and this is just really going to help because Seattle and Washington is really, I mean, you touched on it earlier, restricted with where you can build with. I mean, we've got mountains, we've got water, so being able to add more density into these already lots and being able to subdivide them is just going to really help bring more homes in, increase the supply, because we know the demand here in Seattle always seems to be growing. And I guess getting into kind of the best situations for this, as a developer, what are you kind of looking at for key criteria when you're trying to determine which properties could be best situated for this additions?
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated in that we live in a fairly difficult area because we have lots of topography. Every site is different, and some have more constraints than others. Maybe there's large trees that you have to, try to protect and retain on your property. There may be considerations around, access to utilities and things like that that can cost, more than the development's worth. So, I mean, all of those are just your baseline criteria. But what we really look for is, good neighborhoods that have access to a lot of those things that we all need, access to parks and, nearby neighborhood amenities, nearby transit infrastructure, good schools. I mean, those are all the things that we really look for because for us, we try to create a product, I say product or a home that is designed really well. And so we put a lot of thought into it and, sometimes costs a little bit more, but we really feel like we fit best in those kind of more established neighborhoods.
That's a great kind of business model to have because there are a lot of different developers out there, but a lot of them are just kind of doing those cookie cutter, very basic, very things people don't like necessarily. The common person, they're like, oh, this is ugly. That's what the common people might think. Everyone's like that, but clearly at Stack, you guys kind of take a lot of time in your work and you want to kind of separate yourself with that, showing your dedication to kind of the craft and how you build and what you're looking at and fitting into not just that's just any old developer. You guys kind of try to help your clients differently as well.
Yeah, and I think we've always taken the approach of, if we're building in a neighborhood, I actually want to get to know the neighbors. Like I actually want to talk to the people around it because it can be hugely disruptive, and a lot of developers they never want to talk to the neighbors. They never want to hear what they're looking for, and obviously you can't always make everybody happy in every project, but you really do want to be thoughtful around what's the existing context and how do you build something that's generally appropriate or an improvement on architecturally and design. It's an improvement on what was there before, and so that's something we really try to achieve as much as possible.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Patrick. That's about all I've got for you today. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And happy to do this again if the opportunity ever arises.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure the audience might have more questions after hearing the kind of intro and little basic stuff on the ADUs and DADUs. So if you guys do have any questions or curious about any more, feel free to reach out and I can get you connected to Patrick to dig deeper into that subject. But Until then, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. It's been a pleasure. See you next time on RE Radar.